our art system and our well-living in this art overcoming centuries together. And I would just say that Asian Institute of Technology is a very international institute, and it houses all international students. So this is one of the institutes in Asia which set the ball rolling for technical capacity building in the region. You will hear more about this from our president, and with warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for coming here, and I'm looking forward to next 2 hours of interaction. Auroop, I would invite you to be here, please.
Thank you so much, Joyshri, for this warm welcome. Joyshri, you have been a permanent fixture in our dialogue, believe it or not. Yes, first time you went to Kolkata. 10th time we are coming back here where you are. So we have been following you. And your eco-modernist manifesto has been informing our dialogue for all these 10 years. And one of your co-authors in that eco-modernist manifesto, Professor Ruth D. Fries, we are actually working with, collaborating with her as we speak. So it's been an honor and a pleasure. It's indeed a great honor to be here. Professor Yamamoto, thank you so much for spending your time. Sean, I just met you. Professor Kelly, thanks for being here. Thanks to everybody, Shatabdi, Firuz, Auroop, and Earth, right? So thanks for being here and for lending your time here. We have 32 right now. We'll have one other person is about to come, will join us on Sunday. 32 undergraduate students. I always say these are our best, and they are, you'll see. And they come from many different disciplines as a field like climate change demands. So they could be from environmental science, from international affairs, from data science, economics, environmental engineering, civil engineering, etc. And over time, over these 10 years, this dialogue has had students from all colleges at Northeastern University in Boston. And Northeastern University is one of the largest private universities in the US right now. So I was also pleased to learn that my training, although I'm an engineer by training, but in my PhD, my work was in water, the science of water, hydrologic science. Professor Yamamoto, he just told me he is in water technologies. So this is a great meeting of science and technology. And of course, Professor Joyshri Roy, her background is economics, so we need all these fields. Just as a quick introduction, Dialogue of Civilizations is somewhat grandly named program at Northeastern University to give our students international exposure. The idea of these programs is to focus both on content that the instructor speaks. It's an instructor-led program, study abroad. Focus on both content and cultural immersion, and hopefully the intersection between the two. Our program focuses on climate change and emerging economies, so we have been across the world, from Latin America to Asia to Africa, this time we are here in Thailand, Bangkok and Ayutthaya. We'll also be in Indonesia, Jakarta and Bali. I have my PhD students who are the dialogue program assistants or teaching assistants. If you could just stand up and identify yourself. So we have Dian Indrawati, who is actually originally from Indonesia. We have Danish Mansoor, we have Shochen Wang, and we have Orchita Ghosh. So they are our PhD students, again representing different areas from climate to civil engineering, atmospheric science to electrical engineering and hydrology. Please take your seat. And so our focus is this, and one of the things about our program is it focuses on what we call climate change war games. War games are role-playing exercises. A lot of this program focuses on that in various ways. We have two war games, one focused on mitigation, where we talk about, where individual countries or regions talk to each other. So you will see in these tables here, you'll see the names of those countries. The second war game is focused on adaptation, so that is within one country there are different sectors or regions. You'll see those names also in addition to the individual students' names. And last but not the least, we have the moderator team who runs the show, who are right at the back in their royal seats. So that's our team here. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate this warm welcome. And thank you to everybody.
Our President, Professor Yamamoto, for his enlightening speech for the students.
So, as President, I'd like to read this my speech first. So, honored guests, colleagues, faculty, and students, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome Professor Auroop, Ganguly, and the entire team of students, researchers, faculty, and administrators from Northeastern University in the United States. You have all traveled a long distance to participate in the dialogue of civilization on climate change and emerging economies here at the AIT. Thank you for coming to our campus for this special event. Since our institute's establishment in 1959, AIT has been promoting technological change and sustainable development in Asian Pacific region through higher education, research, and outreach. Today, AIT pursues excellence in research and development in 5 thematic areas, namely climate change, smart communities, food, energy, water, infrastructure, and technology, policy, and society. This dialogue and themes explored align with our modern day mission. I'm happy to see that the Smart Center and the leadership of AIT Distinguished Professor Jersey Lloyd is jointly participating with your prestigious university in this dialogue. The Smart Center studies the impact of climate change and other socio-economical global changes on South and Southeast Asia. It promotes voices from the global South in highlighting the unique challenges of equity, justice, and regional natures in line with many sustainable development goals, especially SDG 12, sustainable production and consumption. The narrative and debate about well-living and well-being are starkly different for the global North and global South, given the unequal starting points, achievement, and capabilities. The further needs to be reimagined and implemented today. Human civilization has evolved through various natural and man-made challenges, and I'm sure that through people-centric focus and scientific approaches, institutions such as ours can achieve innovative solutions. I'm very impressed that this event is an intergenerational dialogue and students are here to understand the challenges. It is the youth who will live through this century and will navigate through the planet's changing climate. AIT provides a space for interaction among the students, coming from diverse regions and helps them grow as global citizens with local understanding. This is very important because for a civilization to thrive, we need mutual understanding and cooperation for peace building. I hope that this dialogue generates dynamic discussions and exchange of ideas and new and meaningful collaborations. This is the written message I added, but I think you are the undergraduate students. I think right now the landscape of higher education changed a lot in the world. Although we have many tools, website, knowledge acquisition, hackathons, and then through the ChatGPT or something like that. And we have AI assist learning here, and then online and remote education is prevailing. However, exposure is very much important. For you, you come from the United States. Exposure to the different environment, not only for these themes, but for all of education. Right now, we recognize exposure is very much important. The different culture, different thinking way. And this is global health context. It's very much important for you to have a kind of the exposure experience. I'm sure this is the source of creative thinking. If you get some experience and through some insight through this experience, then I think you have opportunity to move that your creative actions and activities. Then your case is this is dialogue, global change, and emerging economies. And hopefully we can have a fruitful discussion here and dialogue here. Then, on behalf of AIT, please allow me to wish you a pleasant stay on our campus, beautiful campus. We call it Botanical Garden Campus. And we are now trying to make a net zero by 2030. Then also, please enjoy the campus, stay, and safe journey home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yamamoto, for your motivating speech. And now we will have the ice-breaking session. That is the war game. But before that, what I want is that with Professor Yamamoto and everybody present here, if we can take a photo here, so that will be really helpful. So if you all can come and we can stand here in 2 rows, and then we can take a picture. Our art system and our well-living in this art overcoming centuries together. And I would just say that Asian Institute of Technology is a very international institute, and it houses all international students. So this is one of the institutes in Asia which set the ball rolling for technical capacity building in the region. You will hear more about this from our president, and with warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for coming here, and I'm looking forward to next 2 hours of interaction. Auroop, I would invite you to be here, please.
Thank you so much, Joyshri, for this warm welcome. Joyshri, you have been a permanent fixture in our dialogue, believe it or not. Yes, first time you went to Kolkata. 10th time you are coming back here where you are. So we have been following you. And your eco-modernist manifesto has been informing our dialogue for all these 10 years. And one of your co-authors in that eco-modernist manifesto, Professor Ruth D. Fries, we are actually working with, collaborating with her as we speak. So it's been an honor and a pleasure. It's indeed a great honor to be here. Professor Yamamoto, thank you so much for spending your time. Sean, I just met you. Professor Kelly, thanks for being here. Thanks to everybody, Shatabdi, Firuz, Avro, and Earth, right? So thanks for being here and for lending your time here. We have 32 right now. We'll have one other person is about to come, will join us on Sunday. 32 undergraduate students. I always say these are our best, and they are, you'll see. And they come from many different disciplines as a field like climate change demands. So they could be from environmental science, from international affairs, from data science, economics, environmental engineering, civil engineering, etc. And over time, over these 10 years, this dialogue has had students from all colleges at Northeastern University in Boston. And Northeastern University is one of the largest private universities in the US right now. So I was also pleased to learn that my training, although I am an engineer by training, but in my PhD, my work was in water, the science of water, hydrologic science. Professor Yamamoto, he just told me he was in water technologies. So this is a great meeting of science and technology. And of course, Professor Joyshri Roy, her background is economics. So we need all these fields. Just as a quick introduction, Dialogue of Civilizations is somewhat grandly named program at Northeastern University to give our students international exposure. The idea of these programs is to focus both on content that the instructor speaks. It's an instructor-led program, study abroad. Focus on both content and cultural immersion, and hopefully the intersection between the two. Our program focuses on climate change and emerging economies. So we have been across the world, from Latin America to Asia to Africa. This time we are here in Thailand, Bangkok, and Ayutthaya. Will also be in Indonesia, Jakarta, and Bali. I have my PhD students who are the dialogue program assistants or teaching assistants. If you could just stand up and identify yourself. So we have Dian Indrawati, who is actually originally from Indonesia. We have Danish Mansoor, we have Shochen Wang, and we have Orchita Ghosh. So they are our PhD students, again representing different areas from climate to civil engineering, atmospheric science to electrical engineering and hydrology. Please take your seat. And so our focus is this, and one of the things about our program is it focuses on what we call climate change war games. War games are role-playing exercises. A lot of this program focuses on that in various ways. We have two war games, one focused on mitigation, where we talk about where individual countries or regions talk to each other. So you will see in these tables here, you'll see the names of those countries. The second war game is focused on adaptation, so that is within one country there are different sectors or regions. You'll see those names also in addition to the individual students' names. And last but not the least, we have the moderator team who runs the show, who are right at the back in their royal seats. So that's our team here. Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate this warm welcome. And thank you to everybody.
Our President, Professor Yamamoto, for his enlightening speech for the students.
So, as president, I'd like to lead this my speech first. So, honored guests, colleagues, faculty, and students, good morning. It is my pleasure to welcome Professor Auroop, Ganguly, and the entire team of students, researchers, faculty, and administrators from Northeastern University in the United States. You have all traveled a long distance to participate in a dialogue of civilization on climate change and emerging economies here at the AIT. Thank you for coming to our campus for this special event. Since our institute's establishment in 1959, AIT has been promoting technological change and sustainable development in Asian Pacific region through higher education, research, and outreach. Today, AIT pursues excellence in research and development in 5 thematic areas, namely climate change, smart communities, food, energy, water, infrastructure, and technology, policy, and society. This dialogue and themes explored align with our modern day mission. I'm happy to see that the Smart Center and the leadership of AIT distinguished Professor Jersey Lloyd is jointly participating with your prestigious university in this dialogue. The Smart Center studies the impact of climate change and other socio-economical global changes on South and Southeast Asia. It promotes voices from the global South in highlighting the unique challenges of equity, justice, and regional natures in line with many sustainable development goals, especially SDG 12, sustainable production and consumption. The narrative and debate about well-living and well-being are starkly different for the global North and global South. Given the unequal starting points, achievement, and capabilities, the further needs to be reimagined and implemented today. Human civilization has evolved through various natural and man-made challenges, and I'm sure that through people-centric focus and scientific approaches, institutions such as ours can achieve innovative solutions. I'm very impressed that this event is an intergenerational dialogue, and students are here to understand the challenges. It is the youth who will live through this century and will navigate through the planet's changing climate. It provides a space for interaction among the students coming from diverse regions and helps them grow as global citizens with local understanding. This is very important because for a civilization to thrive, we need mutual understanding and cooperation for peace building. I hope that this dialogue generates dynamic discussions and exchange of ideas and new and meaningful collaborations. This is the written message I added, but I think you are the undergraduate student. I think right now the landscape of higher education changed a lot in the world. Although we have many tools, website, knowledge acquisition, hackathons, and then through the ChatGPT or something like that. And we have AI assist learning here, and then online and remote education is prevailing. However, exposure is very much important. For you, you come from the United States. Exposure to the different environment, not only for these teams, but for all of education. Right now, we recognize exposure is very much important. The different culture, different thinking way. And this is global task context. It's very much important for you to have a kind of the exposure experience, I'm sure. This is the source of creative thinking. If you get some experience and through some insight through this experience, then I think you have opportunity to move that your creative actions and activities. Then your case is this is dialogue, global change, and emerging economies. And hopefully we can have a fruitful discussion here and dialogue here. Then, on behalf of AIT, please allow me to wish you a pleasant stay on our campus, beautiful campus. We call it Botanical Garden Campus. And then we are now trying to make a net zero by 2030. Then also, please enjoy the campus, stay, and safe journey home. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yamamoto, for your motivating speech. And now we will have the ice-breaking session. That is the war game. But before that, what I want is that with Professor Yamamoto and everybody present here, if we can take a photo here, so that will be really helpful. So if you all can come and we can stand here in 2 rows, and then we can take a picture. Has its memory. So when I jokingly said that ice has melted and is flooding, that memory comes back. So with these words, I will invite now Professor Auroop Ganguly, and he will make a presentation, and Shatabdi will help in opening the presentation, and you can get the clicker and the collar mic, and so that you can speak.
Thank you so much, Yashudi. So while this is being set up, the ice has broken, as she was saying, but also, actually, it's probably better if I use one of those mics. So, as I was saying, the ice has broken, and you know, in 2011, this floods in Thailand, I was probably telling some of you earlier also, 2011 was when I moved from the Oak Ridge National Lab to Northeastern University, 2011 fall. And we are trying to get some of our, basic office supplies, the hard disks, the compute power. So we do our research involves a lot of those. And suddenly one of my graduate students then said, I think we should wait a little bit before we buy it. I'm saying, why? He said, well, hard disk prices are suddenly high. And I go, yeah, but how high? He said, no, there's this floods in Thailand. I said, but how high? He said, no, some of them are 1,000% higher. I said, what? So Thailand happened to be one of the hubs in the supply chain for certain elements of the hard disk. And then I got very interested and to find out more. And later, one of my friends at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, so he said, you know, some of us were there in Thailand, and one of the things that he said was happening is, at that point, I believe Thailand was more used to droughts. And then, before the operators, dam operators, reservoirs, they could realize that, wait a second, we are in flood situation. They said, okay, let the water accumulate for a while. It's good for us, it's droughts. And then suddenly this happened. So I think, Danish, your work on the drought deluge cycle is extremely important, especially for dam operators. All right, with that, let's do the following. So just to make sure that all of us here know how skillful we are, and just to wake everybody up after the floods as in not those floods, just the icebreaker, the floods caused by ice. If all of you can please get up and do the following with me.
Wake up, wake up. All right. Yes, you see how talented they are, they can all do this. One goes clockwise, one anti-clockwise. Can you do that? See, look at her. Yes? All right, good. So you're all woken up. The other one, Mark. Right. One goes clockwise, one goes anti-clockwise. Good. Okay, so you're almost woken up. The other half, no, all of it is going wrong. One has to go clockwise, one has to go anti-clockwise. Yeah? Okay, so you're half woken up. The other one is much easier. Can you do that? Here. Okay, take a look. There you go. Much easier. All right.
So I think we have woken up. Hello. All right, so this presentation I'll try to keep it entertaining rather than overly didactic. But there are a few things I'd like to say. So here at Northeastern currently I represent the AI for Climate and Sustainability Institute and also my Sustainability and Data Sciences Lab. And of course we are very happy and thankful to be here. Thanks for your warm welcome at the Asian Institute of Technology. I was telling somebody that Institute of Technology is something I'm very familiar with. My undergrad was from the Indian Institute of Technology. My PhD was from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And here we are at the Asian Institute of Technology. All that being said, universities are the best. There is no beating Northeastern University. Okay, so with that, let us get to okay, so I'll talk a little bit about, this whole thing that President Yamamoto mentioned about the need for exposure, the need to go beyond. I mean, we as in collectively, professors in academia, and most guilty probably, tenured faculty in academia, because we don't have a boss, right, in reality. So we have been a bit guilty of being in our own ivory towers. We do what we like. We have our own expertise, we are expert in some area. Who cares what the world needs? And who cares about expanding our areas of expertise? Who cares about exposure? That is not how things will get solved anymore. That is not how many of us think anymore. So if you think about climate change, it has been the defining challenge of our era, right? And it's going to impact generations in the future. And fortunately or unfortunately, with my background and training in engineering and science, water science, climate science, and a little bit in data science, I cannot solve this problem alone. And with all due respect, Professor Joyce Roy, with all her background and renown in economics and climate and mitigation, she cannot solve it alone. Neither of us here or anywhere can solve these. This is a grand challenge problem which is national, which is international. None of us can solve it alone. So we have to get together. We have to expand our own areas. We have to get a bit more out in the field. And we have to collaborate with each other. And the handicap that some of us feel currently, being, our training has been, for not necessarily the bad, all bad reasons or such, that's how collectively we used to feel, all of us used to feel, that we need to build our silos, our cylinders of excellence, if you call it that. That is just not enough. So we have to go out, and hopefully some of you here will not face that handicap. When you go, you'll have a much more interdisciplinary background and feel, while keeping strengths in certain areas. But even those certain areas may be at the interfaces of traditional areas. So the areas that were defined in, let's say, the 18th and 19th century Europe, or maybe even before in many parts of the world, including here in Asia, may not serve us well when we try to address the major challenges, the grand challenges of 21st century and beyond. So we have to look a little bit differently. So in terms of, when we used to think about projects such as those funded by the National Science Foundation, there would be a lot of arguments about, okay, we have climate science, and, we talk about what we found from climate science and all that, is prediction more important or is understanding more important, right? A lot of debates, there's still debates. And it leaves me, at least right now, a bit in the cold. In the sense that if you are not understanding what you are predicting, are you sure that it will generalize? 10 years later, 30 years later, even in another time and space, forget about 100 years later. And if you think you are understanding something which has no predictive value, are you sure you're understanding something that's true for the natural or human world? Or are you just kidding yourself? You think you're understanding. So these things have to come together. So for example, this is just one project. It was a large National Science Foundation project which I'm highlighting. So it used to be enough to say, okay, I have done something in generative AI, right? That's the thing, or machine learning, broadly speaking, or physics integrated machine learning, and publish in the top venues in computer science at some point. At some point, this used to be said, okay, I am in the science and I publish in areas like, in journals like geophysical research and all that, and if all of that, rise to high impact, then okay, we go to nature and nature climate change. It's no longer enough. You have to do both. This is just an example, but you have to have that interdisciplinary flavor. In addition, once we do that, what we find, okay, these things are cited by Professor Joyshvira here is member of the IPCC writing team. I have never been members of any of these writing teams, national or international and things like that, for which we can talk about, so I prefer it that way. Except somewhere some of my colleagues have said you really need to be here. But many of our work have been cited there, including from this project, right? A lot of the work, actually all three of these, most of our work is at the intersection of the physical science basis and impacts adaptation vulnerability, but some of our work has also been cited in mitigation, right? So if you try to have an interdisciplinary focus, then there is that impact, this is global, but also across in terms of community engaged work. So this is communities all the way from city of Boston to town of Brookline to the US. This, by the way, was an interesting work that was started for sustained national climate assessment. Actually, the person who was leading this, Richard Moss, asked me, called me up and said, you need to join, so I said, fine. And that was a big jinx. Because we started this work, and the then President of the United States of America decided in his infinite wisdom to axe that panel. So my major experience, the only one where I actually said yes, they actually axed that panel. But anyway, the scientists got together and did publish it. So community engaged work across different strata, from towns, cities, villages. I have not done that much work with villages, others have. All the way to nations and international organizations. And the other thing is going a little bit more into things like private sector startups. So if somebody else can come to us and say, okay, this is what we mean. I mean, all the money is in hedge funds and all that. that, more power to you. I have nothing against anybody making, huge amounts of money in hedge funds. But hey, there is money to be made if you want, and in these kind of things that we do. There is money to be made, there are things you can do which helps people. So one of my PhD students said, can we not do something and show that it can be done? And that is one of the things. So across the board, I think there are a lot of opportunities these days, a lot of challenges. So that is one of the things that I feel passionate about when I have students like you and bring all of you, including my PhD students, but also all of you, is to come here, whatever be your interest. At some point in our classrooms, I used to say, especially for those guys who do, let's say, machine learning or math or computer science, tell me what are your interests and then I can guide you a little bit. Very broadly, are you interested in making money or saving lives? That's just a joke. These days we don't need to have that as an or. Make money, save lives, use that money to save more lives. Okay. Alright, so just by way of acknowledgement, here are some of my former PhD students and postdocs. They are not all of them, this is not an exhaustive list, but their work will be cited more in this particular presentation. Current PhD students are here because most of them are new. So at some point you'll see all of them here. Alright, so in terms of this dialogue, we go around the world. This is just one example. Anybody, can you guess which part of the world this is? Do I already have it written there? No, good. Okay, Machu Picchu. And these animals, anybody recognize those animals? Speak up, speak up. Piranha, yes. Okay, pink dolphin, yes, which is actually a toothed whale, but yes. Oh, what did I do? There you go. Yeah, and that's a baby caiman. So this is from the Amazons in Brazil. So this was 2018 when we visited Peru and Brazil, and these are of course incredible opportunities. And Prabodh and Prasanna were there. So by now we have a long association starting 2014 onwards. So last year, and here actually one of the current PhD students is here, Diya Indravati. The others are even more younger. So this was just last year in May. We were invited to go to the United Nations headquarters, talk about some of the things in infrastructure, sustainability and climate. Diya was with us. The others they joined just that fall. Alright, so Joyashree asked me to talk about overall climate science and where we are. And I thought that I could do that maybe at some point, but that would be too much and too didactic. So I thought I'll talk about my personal views. So one question is, there is a saying that if you have a hammer, the world looks like a nail. And I had a person who was like a mentor at the Oak National Laboratory. You might actually know Tom Wilbanks, the late Tom Wilbanks. So he used to say, and the president is not here, right? Okay. So he used to say, so if you have a hammer, the world looks like a nail. If you have a screwdriver, the world is screwed. So, that's the kind of thing. So question is, are we solving a problem or are we just making up a problem just because we love that? No harm with that. If you are solving something in abstract mathematical theory, again, more power to you, but that's not what we are solving. So, being the vain and egotistic person that I am, I'll just quote two, media articles which quoted me. But just to give an idea of the kind of work we do, one is what some people have been calling global weirding. So the idea here is that one person who has really popularized this is Dr. Catherine Hayhoe, Hayhoe. We'll talk more about her. She actually visited our lab, all of my lab people have seen her. So she is an excellent climate scientist and a top climate communicator, one of the top, Time 100 and all that. And right now she is the president of the Nature Conservancy. Not president, sorry, chief scientist of the Nature Conservancy. Anyway, many others have said this before, but she has been popularizing this phrase that, global warming just doesn't convey the nature of the beast. Okay, a little bit of warming, so what? It sounds like fun sometimes, even especially when we hear it, maybe, okay, warmer than this, but if you're in Boston, a little bit warming, yeah, it did no harm to anybody. But this is really global weirding. It causes extremes all over. It changes things. So it is, it is not just heat waves, cold snaps, precipitation extremes, but it's also the impacts. The other thing that's sometimes happening is that the uncertainty is higher. So uncertainties are something we cannot ignore, because even our decisions need to consider those uncertainties, because failure happens at some of the worst cases. But at the same time, it's very hard to account for these and even characterize these, right? So that's one part of it. The other thing is a broad definition of infrastructures, whether it's buildings, bridges, whether it's protective infrastructures like levees, dams, reservoirs, whether it's emergency healthcare, whether it's, lifeline infrastructures like transportation, communications, water, power, etc. That's what, as civilizationally, sometimes we call ourselves civilized, by the way. Civilizationally, that's what we do. We build infrastructures. And something about that is just not, we need to do a bit more. So one thing is, first of all, even buildings. There was very ancient, Babylon, there was this ruler called Hammurabi, and he had the code, the Hammurabi Code. The Hammurabi Code said something like, just as an example, if a building falls on the head of the owner and kills that person, the builder must be executed, etc., etc. So these days, builders are not usually, civil engineers are not usually executed, but they may face lawsuits, serious lawsuits, right? We have grown a bit better in general. Our buildings don't usually fall apart, bridges don't usually break. They do sometimes. But the thing is, the design curves are changing on us. What we design for, they are changing. So we need better codes which are less prescriptive and more performance-based. That it cannot fall on the head of the owner. Refined versions of those. The other thing is we need to think more of grey and green infrastructures. So not just the hard levee infrastructure, they are needed, hard levees and dams, but also mangroves, oyster beds, other kinds of things. Urban greenery, which can reduce, the impact of heat waves. In some cases, we may have to think about relocation from certain regions. But it's easy to say that. And then it's easy to do something where those communities that are the most, which already have more resources and are not as disadvantaged, they don't either need to relocate, or even if they relocate, they have the resources. The ones that suffer are the disadvantaged communities. So even that has to be equitable. Now, here is coming from all that now to where is this whole climate science engineering policy and one view of that. So as I say, when I was at Oak Ridge Lab, Tom Wilbanks was one of my mentors, or mentor-like individuals, not an official mentor, but you have so many mentor-like individuals. Another was David. So after the IPCC Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change won the Nobel Prize Nobel Prize in Peace in 2007, one of my mentors, Dave Erickson, he's an atmospheric chemist, deals with ozone holes and stuff, and also deals with climate, or is the late David Erickson now, so we used to deal with that. So he went to the AGU, the American Geophysical Union conference, called me and said, "Oh, what are you here?" I said, "No, Dave, this time I couldn't go. What happened?" He said, "Till last year, till a few months back, we had 3 Nobel laureates in our field. These guys, the ozone hole guys. Now we have 3,003 because of IPCC, right? There are so many people in IPCC. It's a mess, Auroop, it's hard to deal. You should have been here." I said, "Okay, so what's going on?" That made me think a little bit. And one interesting thing, eventually, as I thought about this, now I am associated with one, of course, in many ways with climate, but also with one United Nations panel that discusses the interaction between ozone hole and climate. So, one interesting thing, you look at this whole ozone hole problem. Very interesting. 1974, there was a paper in this journal called Nature. Nature is arguably the highest impact and most recognized journal of science anywhere in the world. So, 1974, there was this paper based on lab experiments that these methanes, which occur in certain refrigerants, etc., they can cause changes in the stratosphere, which eventually leads to destruction of ozone. Mario Molina and Roland. I was lucky, by the way, that to get a little bit of, Professor Molina was a teacher in one of the courses that I took. But that is one thing. 1974, 14 years later, the Montreal Protocol was finalized. International protocol which said that, okay, based on this science and some other science, of course, but primarily based on this, here is the protocol in action. 7 years later came the Nobel Prize for these three scientists, right? And if you think about how this has worked, this has actually worked not too badly, right, in terms of this as a whole. So we are getting to a stage, we cannot say yet that the problem is solved or completely closed, but it's getting better. Here is 2020, Kigali amendment exceeds 100 certifications, that's a lot. Even the United States at some point chose to join. United States, as you might know, unfortunately for many of us, in terms of no longer the leaders in environment. Although, if you think of this Montreal Protocol, it was a Republican president, President Ronald Reagan, who, from a risk management perspective, said something needs to be done, and it happened. But, days change, hopefully we'll come back to that. And here's something interesting that I learned at that UN panel. If the Kigali Pact is successfully implemented, one of the side effects would be significant reduction of warming. That may actually be more than what we have been able to achieve through climate mitigation so far. That's a loose statement, if you will, but may actually be the case. So we are just joking about that. Now let's come to climate. The situation is exactly reversed. So the science happened, then the Montreal Protocol was signed, and then Nobel Prize. Here, the first Nobel Prize was for peace, right? Then there was this prize for economics, which relates to adaptation and things like that, technological growth and adaptation. And then the physics prize in 2021. So it almost got the other way. So the physics prize, and Sekiro Manabe is somebody who did climate modeling. Klaus Hasselmann, somebody who does attribution. Very broadly, I'm saying. They do all kinds of things, of course, but very broadly attribution. So they process climate model simulations and observations. Giorgio Parisi, who is somebody who looks at complex systems in general. So 2021 Nobel Prize in Physics. So climate science finally caught up with adaptation science. Usually you think it goes the other way, but not in climate necessarily. And this is, Bill Nordhaus and Paul Romer talking about various aspects of climate and economics. This about technology and economics, this about climate adaptation and economics, 3 years before. And 11 years before there was this. So clearly there is a gap here. The pace at which science and engineering and even economics and social science, maybe even more so, has been progressing. It's failing to keep pace with the urgency of stakeholder requirements and policy requirements, right? And some of the results of that, this is Dr. Klaus Hasselmann, who has spent his life in attributions and things, got a Nobel Prize. This is a very unfortunate statement, right? Coming from him. Not unfortunate that he made it, but unfortunate for all of us as humanity, that he had to say that I hope young people succeed where we scientists have not. Very unfortunate that he has to say that. And so sometimes when I think about, Greta Thunberg and others, there's definitely space for that kind of, this thing. And look here, climate pledges are falling short in a chaotic future. This is not the chaos that we talk about in chaos theory, of course, which we will learn in this class. But chaotic future looks more likely. So that is the state, right? What happens, this is the original war game which motivated my thought, the original climate war game where I participated, which I at some point turned into this, what you call pedagogical tool or learning tool, and we use it. This war game was run by the Center for New American Security this was towards the tail end of the George W. Bush era, when people knew that, okay, administrations are going to change. And then, they called these countries at that point who were either were or were going to be the top emitters in the world. US, China, European Union, and India. And then they had one contingent for rest of the world. They said that nothing is happening in terms of these big agreements. This was pre-Paris agreement, by the way. Let's at least get the big emitters. So they got the real people who participate in these agreements, but this was done as a role-playing exercise, as a war game. I was at Oak Ridge National Lab then, so they asked Oak Ridge Lab to provide some of these figures to motivate the war game. So that gave me this opportunity, and then they said, okay, you have done that, why don't you come here? So that gave me an opportunity to participate. The underlying figures were created by us. These things, this won't come out of my brain. Look at the succinct way in which this is described. Adaptation is managing the unavoidable, mitigation is avoiding the unmanageable, right? I mean, it doesn't capture everything, but it succinctly describes what is at the root. That we have to adapt to something we are already committed to, but we can. If we don't do something, then we are getting into some things that will look really bad. But one thing that became clear there, and is abundantly clear now again and again, is that mitigation is motivated by what happens internally across these countries. So what does it mean for me as, I don't know, China, India, US, European Union, or rest of the world? Rest of the world was not happy to get just one delegation here, but well, that was how this particular war games was run. But what does it mean for me in terms of hazard? Will my island vanish? Right? Will more people die? Will business continually suffer? So that's the hazard, which includes critical infrastructures, resources, food, energy, water. What does it mean? And then population is something that impacts both adaptation and mitigation. Population is impacted by hazards and scarcity of resources. Population impacts, in turn, resource scarcity. All of these leads to emissions discussion. So the unfortunate reality is that emissions discussions are not motivated by the world needs this, we need to save humanity, we need to save the planet, which in this case, as we were discussing earlier in another context, means save humanity on the planet. Planet has existed much before we have. But that's not what motivates the discussion. Usually it's something that, we will also lose, we are in this together. And that's why we have these two war games, one on adaptation, one on mitigation by sectors. Okay, so coming to that now, one of my PhD students, he was my first PhD student at Northeastern. I've had other PhD students elsewhere, but he was the first at Northeastern. He actually moved with me so when I was doing his master's at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, he moved with me to Boston. So, he's a very good scientist. He has done a lot of very interesting work, but he came to me and asked me, we talk about all this doom and gloom, all these things that may happen, but we don't do anything about it. So I told him, what do you plan to do? He said, okay, let's see if we can do something which is real, which can show that even in the climate world, we can do entrepreneurship. So the kind of work he has done in his dissertation and elsewhere is very, very involved. So here is, for example, physics-guided modeling of extreme precipitation under climate change, a lot of Bayesian modeling, data sciences, climate science infused, uncertainties. Very interesting work. Research. Similarly, some others, they did work on, there are certain gaps in the current generation of climate and Earth system models, especially at the scales that stakeholders need information. We often do not have that. So there is that gap in what is called, scale problem. So trying to address part of that scale problem with AI and machine learning, combined with process understanding. Similarly, trying to understand how climate models, the kind of post-processing you can do with climate models to get insight, potentially with artificial intelligence, but then being able to explain that black box. So I'm going over this very fast to you. For those of you who are in the class, we can always talk about this. For others, these things are there, some of these are published, we can always talk. But just to give you an idea, where would this lead towards? So I'll focus on two things. One is community. When I say entrepreneurship here, I mean two things. One is community engaged, community focused work, and the other is private sector entrepreneurship. I've not worked as I would love to, so hopefully as we talk more, I talk with others that will change. But I work with Climate Ready Boston, that's from Boston's mayor's office. We did something with extreme temperatures, right? That's the section that we led. That's Evan. By that time he had his startup. So he was the CEO and co-founder. I was also one of the co-founders. I didn't, he's the one who did everything. So that was the extreme temperature, and then we had something similar for Greater Boston, where Evan, along with some other students, then Kate Duffy and Lizzie Warner, they joined, and then there were a few others. This was sort of like the IPCC's working group 1, physical science basis. This was the city of Boston's answer to IPCC working group 1. What will happen? And that would then inform Boston's climate ready efforts. Similarly, we looked at the town of Brookline, which had much less resources, and they wanted us to look at public health risk of urban heat waves. The framework that the IPCC uses to understand risk, we took that framework and then we adapted it in the context of just urban heat waves and public health risk. What does it mean for risk assessment and reducing, mitigating risk? What does it mean for the things we can control, both at urban scale and at global scale? What does it mean for adaptation and mitigation, right? So all of these kind of things, and of course we'll talk more about that. The idea here is that these are examples of community-focused work. Here's an example, that's the guy, that's the man. So here's an example of, private sector companies. So this looked at climate hazards, climate extremes, and Evan was the CEO. There's one other person, Carlene Hay, she really joined from, I believe UMass Amherst, and she, changed the complexion of this company. A lot of physics, machine learning, data science to understand uncertainties from sea level rise and what does it mean for value at risk and so on in cities, communities. But then for startups, you have to monetize. For startups, you also have to make it sustainable. The people who, it used to be, and to some extent it still is, that, if you're working in climate, you have to be an ascetic and you cannot pay your bills, somebody else has to pay your bills. No, you can work in climate and you can pay bills for, for your rent and as you grow up one day for your kids if they want to go to college, etc., etc. So where he saw that business need is in urban bond markets. There's this huge gap where bond investors, rating agencies, and bond issuers did not really know how to assign some sort of score or even understand what is better, what is worse, where action is taken. So that is where this monetization happened. So strongly urge you, some of you who are interested, I know that some of you, think about various sustainable areas, including business and so on, urge you to think about this. This is not the only one. This is the template. There could be other things like this. Oh, and similarly, two of my other PhD students, Kate Duffy and Thomas Venner, they have started this, after finishing their PhD in my lab, they joined NASA as scientists, and then they got NASA funding to launch their own startups. So they have this startup in AI and weather forecasting. One other thing that we are trying to do right now is in the area of infrastructures, lifeline infrastructures such as transportation systems. What happens during failure and how can you best recover post-failure? This has implications for things like transportation systems, water distribution, power systems, but also airports and seaports around the world and defense installations. So that's another thing, we have just applied for we have two earlier patents, we applied for a patent in this area, it's sort of patent. This is joint work with, so Jack Watson, one of my current PhD students, is leading it, and there is PNL and University of California, Berkeley. Marta Gonzalez is a very old co-conspirator by now. So now, just wanted to give you a broad feel, right? I know that this doesn't get into depths in any other thing. But I wanted to end with this thing. What happens when you are faced with profound existential questions? And this is especially for students here, at AIT and Northeastern everywhere, right? This is the story of what I call sugar, water, and apple. Any of you heard this story? Shochan is busy seeing that on Google. No, I'm just kidding. Any of you heard about this story? Sugar, water, and apple? Do you know what I'm talking about? Good. So, sugar water in this case refers to Pepsi, and apple is basically iPhone. So, when the story goes that when Steve Jobs and Apple wanted to go and recruit John Scully from Pepsi, who was the CEO of Pepsi, for Apple, and said, this is really something good we are doing here, this is really something which is going to transform the world, you come and join. He said, hey, I'm already the CEO of Pepsi, why should I join you? So he said something like this, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world? Fascinating, right? So my question is, what is your sugar water? And where can you change the world? What motivates me, among all these things that I mentioned, what really motivates me, and don't bother about the pictures, I'll try to summarize them. What motivates me the most are the silent stakeholders. Biodiversity. The stakeholders who don't have a seat on the table but are impacted the most. And who in turn impacts us. If all our insects die, we are kaput. If all plants, animals die, we are gone. So they impact us also, but they don't have the voice. So some of the work we have done, by the way, this is work by Dai Wei Wang, who was a postdoc. Work led by him, and then there are many of us, which talked about an index for marine ecosystems under climate change, an important index for marine ecosystems. Then this was work led by Kate Duffy, and she was looking at how changes in climate mean combined with changes in climate variability can create havoc for insect lives, ectotherms, cold-blooded animals. And then this other one is more recent work by Professor Udit Bhatia and others, which is about recovery of damaged ecosystems. Just as an idea, this is the silent stakeholder. What can we do about it? This keeps me at least motivated, right? So this is the let's change the world kind of thing that keeps me motivated as opposed to some other sugar water that I could also have. So here is, I come from a place in the world called Bengal. There is West Bengal in India, there is Bangladesh as a country, and there are these iconic animals, Bengal tigers. And here is New York Times that they might be impacted by climate change. So huge impacts across infrastructures, biodiversity, and of course natural human systems. So my question to you is, if you are not already convinced, what's your sugar water? Thank you.
We'll take questions after I give you some more salt water, and then we mix salt and sugar and with lemon and have a good drink, and then we can have the question and answer session. Before I go to that, to my presentation, I want to request Shatabdi to, he did some physical exercise, but after Auroop's presentation, we need to do some mental exercise. So what is that? Let me see how we feel about it. So you all have your login password and everything. So can you read this QR code and can we see the first one?